Let's imagine you find a very long rope on the ground. You never know where the rope starts or ends. The only solution that will remain for you is to hold the rope and move in one of its direction in order to know whether this path leads to its beginning or its end. After a very long time, while you were continuing to move, you stop for a moment and ask yourself a question. What if this rope has no beginning or end? What happens if you keep tracking this rope forever? Will I reach its end? Or am I moving in a circular path where I cannot know its beginning? The same questions, we can apply it to the universe. We know that this vast and great universe is the result of an evolution that took place 13.7 billion years after the Big Bang. We don't want to talk about what happened before the explosion, but we want to know today, did anything ever happen before the explosion? And will events continue to happen forever in space and time? Is time infinite? Or in other words, does the infinite exist in our universe? Well, we will talk about it now. In order to answer these questions, we must first explain what is the meaning of the infinity. The fact that the infinite is the largest number among all the numbers is false, because the infinite is not a unit or a number. In short, infinite is not a value in math. Rather, infinite represents the total and whole existing numbers which are infinite. In mathematics, the largest number that can be calculated is the Google number, which equals to 10 to the power of 100. And the greater number than Google is Googleplex, which equals to 10 to the power of 10 to the power of 100. Despite these large numbers, there will still be numbers that are infinitely larger. There is a type of infinite called the countable infinite. In this type, the numbers in the number line are divided into smaller numbers. For example, between 1 and 2, fractions are divided into 3 numbers, and between number 2 and 3, the numbers line is divided into 3 fractions, and the stage continues. This is the definition of the countable infinite, in which is represented on the number line is infinitely. Richard Feynman once said, "Observation, cause, and experiment create for us what is known as a scientific method." So, if we want to know the nature of the infinite, we must have observed and laboratory examples for it. There's an idea called Feynman infinite quantum paths. In this theory, Feynman draws a diagram for us that represents the movement of a particle from one point to another. In this representation, we can simply point the particle in a straight direction to reach the other point. But Feynman was thinking differently about this question. Feynman believed that when the particle is launched from one point to the other point, it has an infinite number of possibilities and directions to reach that point. Feynman wanted to explain this idea in a detailed and logical way, so he drew a graph that represents space and time in which we can calculate the motion of the particle. The particle runs from point A to point B. The infinite possibilities that we can see are unimaginable. This movement can be a spiral, a refracted motion, or even a movement throughout space, and many other infinite possibilities. Another infinite process for the particle is a brief illustration of the Feynman diagram process that represents the transformation of what is happening to the particle. In this diagram, the virtual particle is divided into two positive and negative particles, and it may be infinite if the pattern is complicated by more than two objects. For example, if the particle moves and continues to release energy in the form of a photon, the photon will not move freely. Rather, the photon will return to the particle and be released again. But there comes a rare case in which the photon turns into two virtual particles, then the two particles return to the state of the photon and the process returns to its course. This process is a small part of the infinite possibilities processes. If you are confused by the Feynman diagram, nobody blames you, because it's a really complex theory and we will talk about it in the future videos. After this long and complicated explanation, we will talk about the infinite and space and time. We know that the cosmic inflation depends so much on the dark energy, and its different level will determine for us whether the universe will accelerate or deaccelerate, which we talked about it earlier. CMB, or cosmic microwave background, it shows us more than one idea about the universe, and this is what makes the CMB amazing. It don't just visualize the early universe, but also it shows us whether the universe is flat, spherical, or negatively shaped. To find this out, we have to calculate the degree of the imaging points in the microwave background. If the degree is equal to more than 1, then the universe will be spherical. If the degree is equal to 1, then the universe is flat, and if the degree is less than 1, then the universe will be negative form. And surprisingly, the universe is flat. It turns out that light moving in the universe is counted at the angles at which light moves in empty space. If the angle was 118 degrees in the spherical universe, it will remain uncounted areas for light. And if the angle was negative, the light will not move directly and there will be an imbalance in the calculation of light movement in a vacuum. As a result, the flat universe that began its expansion hundreds of thousands of years after the Big Bang. So, in other words, this should give us an evidence that there is no such thing as infinite past, and space and time have a definite beginning. However, if this is true, what about the Big Bang theory? Doesn't cause an endless creation of universes? Well, we would have taken this theory into account if time was moving with a different mechanism, but time is moving in one direction. Upon the infinite expansion of the universe expands on the void or non-existing universe, beyond the horizon of the universe and events. In that region, it is impossible for anything or any form of energy to exist there. There's no space, there's no dimensions there to create motion for any form body. So, if the infinite past is impossible, let's talk about the infinite future. The permanent and eternal expansion of the universe will cause a great condition called the Big Rip, which will cause another condition called the Great Freeze, in which the temperature will drop to 0 and the stars will not burn after that and begin to explode. And all sources of energy in the universe will disappear except for black holes. And we will have a dark, cold, and broad universe at the same time, and the universe will remain like this forever. Some of the theories say that it's possible that the energy level will increase at 0 point, causing us to have another Big Bang. If this idea were correct, then the application of the idea of infinite universe will also make sense. In other words, the death of the larger universe and the birth of the new universe will be eternal. In one impossible case, it could create for us an infinite circle of the universe, like the Big Bang, which is the predestination paradox. In this theory, what happens in the past, its cause may lie in the future. For example, supernatural bodies and gravity will cause the universe to change in space and time, and the speed of event occurrence, which is described by the principle of causality and the theory of relativity. As a result, it's possible that the infinite circle in which we live in the universe is among the things that move in its space and time dimensions and cause what happened to it in the past. And this is what the predestination paradox means. Maybe the universe was never infinite before. Maybe something happened to make the universe last. This question is similar to another paradox called the grandfather paradox. In this paradox, you invent a time machine, then you go back to the past and kill your grandfather. As a result, you will also not be born. So no one invents a time machine and no one kills your grandfather. Your father will born, and that means you will born too, and you invent the time machine, and the circle returns and repeats forever. In this case, perhaps the universe was finite, and then it became infinite. Well, there are ideas that contradict the grandfather paradox. According to quantum mechanics, if you go back in time and kill your grandfather, you are not going to disappear. Because when you killed your grandfather, you created a universe with a second possibility that was caused by you, and you killed someone else's grandfather and not your own. In the end, all of this talks about the possibilities that there is no much evidence for it. Maybe someday we will talk about each topic and its details in the next videos. We talked about the infinite Feynman quantum theory, in which there are infinite possibilities for a particle to move in the space and time or between 2 points. Are these possibilities present or occurred but not in front of us? Are all these possibilities have a special universe? Well, we will leave this topic for another video. Until that day, do not stop wondering and be curious.